aggression from technology companies with significant market shares not only needlessly infringes on property rights, but also undermines competition and constrains innovation. We tell you on Side Opposition today that the protection of ideas is fundamental to a thriving technology industry. Two main questions of rebuttal in my speech. Firstly, about whether patent protection is as harmful as they tell us it is, and secondly, on whether property rights should be limited. On this first question about whether or not this is really harmful. So we had a lot of the discussion from First Prop today telling us about why patent protection means there's going to be high prices. I mean, this flies in the face of all empirical data that shows you that smartphone prices are drastically falling and continue to fall over recent years. I mean, they actually need to deal with the realities of the fact that the tech industry is highly competitive even though patents exist. Secondly, there's the whole idea of small businesses, right, and how they're being pressured down. We think firstly in terms of the analysis they told us about litigation, right, and they tell us that because of the fact large companies are spending money on litigation, they don't have enough money to have research and development. Firstly, we tell you that these big companies they want to talk about still have limited amount of money, so that the lawsuits they are arguing are actually, when they actually do fight them, we tell you that they are actually worth it. We think that secondly, it's just empirically untrue that small firms are bullied out. We tell you to actually look at the number of small startups in the industry. We think that provides a very clear answer that their reality isn't true. Third, we tell you that large companies simply can't afford to bully out every single small innovative firm. But also we tell you that on our side, Team UAE, we're more than happy to severely sanction firms that do pursue frivolous patent lawsuits, and we think they're okay with doing that too. But also in terms of small businesses being unable to innovate, we know that firstly, on our side, big companies can innovate because they still have the money to actually invest in research and development. We still think we still get innovation in our market. But secondly, we tell you in terms of small companies being unable to innovate, what actually happens on their side of the house is that small companies don't innovate due to the fact that as soon as they do, and as soon as they start increasing their profits, they immediately get forced to put a patent on them. We think that's a disincentive for them actually innovating in the first place. But before I move on, firstly, second question about property rights and whether or not they're limited. So, and the sort of analysis they gave us here is stuff about government funding and just in general why property rights aren't absolute and they're instrumental. So firstly, a lot of this I deal with in my substantive and I'll flag it up. But importantly, note here, when we asked them at POI about copyright, they told us that's not relevant in the debate. Hold on a second, copyright is basically the same thing as patent protection. That's to say that it recognizes people have intellectual property and therefore protects it. So they need to tell us whether they are okay with copyright and thus recognize and appreciate the intellectual property. Alternatively, they don't and they actually ruin tech companies. We need an answer to that in their second speech. But finally, we also tell you that in terms of the money that these sort of companies have, we tell you investors invest a large amount of people's pensions and people's savings into these companies, which goes to sort of technology they produce. We tell you that on their side what happens is the government essentially erodes that when they remove patent protection. They need to tell us why that's okay. Moving on to my substantive in today's case. I'm going to be talking to you about why, firstly, this policy is an unjustified breach of property rights by the state, and secondly, why this policy increases consolidation in the technology industry. First argument about why it's an unjustified and disproportionate breach of property rights by the state. We say this is for the first reason why this is true is that individuals have a right to their intellectual property that is not just instrumental. We tell you when people pour an incredible amount of time and effort and resources into creating something, we think that that work becomes an extension of themselves. And we think because people own themselves, it follows that they should own a product they have put so much time and work into. Even if such action would be good for the economy if we didn't do it. Yes?
In your world, these individual inventors have to cede patent protection rights to their companies, so you're not promoting this innovative process either.
So firstly, we think that due to the fact that there is competition in the industry, people have to innovate to actually remain in it. We think that's why we get innovation on our side. But secondly, we also tell you that you need to deal with the fact that when people create things, that is a right that they have over that property. Their second speaker needs to tell us about why that right isn't absolute if you want to win the debate. Sure. We tell you that when teams of engineers work to create intellectual property, we tell you that is no different from any other sorts of creations. We think that they too spend time and effort and resources. And we think it would be wrong for another company to simply step in, claim that work as their own, and derive rewards from that sale. We tell you that this principle is especially true in the technology industry, where intellectual property is a fundamental asset. We tell you that companies like Microsoft and IBM are literally a collection of intellectual property, and for others to steal that is to literally steal the value of that company. Second reason about why property rights must hold true. We tell you that the government is terrible at adjudicating the types of cases they will have on their side. We think that one of the areas we grant right protections is areas where we think that we can't trust the government not to misuse its authority. We tell you that Proposition's policy will require the government to make a series of decisions that are too difficult for the government to make well and fairly. What type of decisions are we talking about? Firstly, the government will have to decide what a technology firm is. Secondly, they'll have to decide what constitutes a sector. These are types of questions about whether Uber is a taxi company or a ride-sharing company. I think that that's sort of decisions government is going to have to make. Two reasons why these decisions are not going to be made well by the government. Firstly, we tell you that the government lacks information and expertise. Secondly, we say that these decisions have multi-billion-dollar implications. That's to say that the companies will create a profound incentive to corrupt the government institutions that make these decisions. But importantly, we tell you that there are more effective alternatives that increase competition in the market. What types of alternatives are we talking about? We're talking about loosening stringent licensing permissions, things like antitrust laws, things like sanctions for frivolous patent lawsuits, as I previously told you. Crucially, these such alternatives involve no removal of property rights for vast swaths of people. We tell you that, therefore, this policy is a justified breach of property rights by the state. Second argument about why this policy increases consolidation in the tech industry, meaning that it reduces competition, and why this is so harmful. We tell you that Proposition's policy makes markets much more monopolistic. We tell you that right now the tech industry is one of the most competitive industries in the world. Comparatively, in other industries, we tell you that large firms entrench themselves by building massive networks of infrastructure that allow them to manufacture and distribute products for a fraction of the cost of their competitors. What this means is that no other firms can overtake a monopoly and once it's able to establish itself. However, in the tech industry, we think this model doesn't work because companies' intellectual property is its most valuable asset. What this means is that firms that dominated the market a few years ago no longer can. We're looking at places like companies like Yahoo and AOL, because as soon as they become ancient relics due to the fact that they run out of good ideas. We tell you that if companies, however, can steal each other's IP, we know these big companies would immediately copy the ideas of their other competition. But we tell you that also the monopolistic tech industry created by Proposition today would be terrible for society. Why? We tell you that monopolistic firms restrict labour mobility. This is to say that in order to protect IP, these firms would force their employees to sign aggressive non-compete and non-disclosure forms. What this means is that it will largely stagnate the tech industry. Why? Because we think that the most successful tech companies were founded by people who were originally part of more established companies. We look to the founder of Android, who was previously an ex-Apple engineer. Firstly, we tell you this is so bad because, firstly, this policy suffocates the startup sector in the name of its preservation. But secondly, we tell you that monopolies reduce the quality of products and increase their prices. Ladies and gentlemen, because we tell you that this policy Proposition are proposing irreparably harms the tech industry, reduces competition, but also erodes property rights, we beg you to oppose.